Hello, hello. How's everybody? Oh, come on, let's do that again. How's everybody? There you go. You're making me and Ben feel bad. Like we can't get a nice. Two brothers
Bro,
can't get a good introduction. A good
You know,
welcome.
I gotta tell you, when you tell the son of two psychotherapists that he's on the couch and
Yeah.
you're in the chair,
Yeah.
I feel awkward already.
Well, you're on the couch, brother, so get used to it. My name is Tavis, and I'm delighted to be here. We have 25 minutes. I want to make the most of our time. I have been fortunate over the course of my career to be on television and radio addressing many of the issues that you're addressing here today. Before I commence our conversation with Ben Jealous, who I'm honored to be alongside today, let me ask you to thank Debbie and Asher Levin. Couldn't get it out of my mouth. Thank them one more time for convening us here today at Emma. Debbie and Asher, we thank you. Thank you. I couldn't get it out, but I want to thank the Levins. It means something. We live in a world that's facing serious challenges. We are in search of serious solutions to serious problems, and there are people doing some serious work. And I think every chance we get, we ought to thank them and acknowledge them for the work they're doing. So I want to thank again Debbie and Asher for having us here for the work they're doing through Emma. Yeah, give it to them. Give it to them one more time. Give it to them one more time. That said, I want to hasten to get to Ben, but a quick word about what I'm doing these days and why I am here with Ben, aside from the invitation to join in, which I'm grateful for. I am the owner of the only black-owned talk radio station west of the Mississippi. When you think about the behemoth that talk radio is in this country and the impact that it has on providing people information, oftentimes people take their political cues, as you well know, from talk radio. You think about the behemoth of thousands and tens of thousands of stations across the country and the impact that talk radio has. Then you consider there are only 5 black-owned talk radio stations in the entire country. 5, literally. And we are the only one west of the Mississippi. We are KBLA 1580 AM here in LA. KBLA Talk 1580 is how we brand. But we're in the midst right now of a $2 million plus climate justice campaign, a year-long campaign. There has never been in the history of this country any black-owned or colored media outlet that's invested that kind of money, that kind of energy and effort in a climate justice campaign. I'll tell you more about that later, but we're in the midst of a 12-month campaign. There's a major event coming up on June the 18th. I'll tell you this now. The nation has never seen a stage full of people of color. Nothing against my white brothers and sisters on the west side and beyond, but the nation in the most multicultural, multiracial, multi-ethnic America ever. The data is incontrovertible. In a few years, people of color combined will outnumber our white brothers and sisters. That is our reality. Sorry, but that's the reality. And somebody had better figure out a way to communicate to these people who are the disproportionate victims of these climate catastrophes and climate maladies. We've taken it upon ourselves at KBLA to engage in a year-long campaign, and one of the major pieces of that, there are a lot of pieces, one of the major pieces is that on Tuesday, June the 18th, in prime time on C-SPAN, for the first time ever, there will be a stage full of nothing but people of color engaged in a conversation about the urgency of now, climate justice, climate equity, and climate resilience. Nothing but people of color on this stage that the whole world will see for the first time ever. I am honored to moderate that conversation, and it's being sponsored, of course, by our station, a lot of other people who are making this happen. Ben Jealous is on that panel. My dear friend, Reverend Lennox Yearwood, Hip Hop Caucus is on that panel. But there are a lot of black thinkers and influencers and thought leaders who are on that panel. And so that's June the 18th, Tuesday night, 4 to 7 LA. 7 to 10 Eastern Time, 6 to 9 Central Time, but the nation will see something they've never seen. Again, I'm excited about flipping the frame and letting people know that people of color are as invested in this as others are, and we cannot leave these communities out of these conversations. And so to that end, I'm honored to introduce my friend Ben Jealous, who is the head of the Sierra Club, as you well know, and one of the sponsors and partners with us in this year-long climate justice campaign. A quick word about why Ben Jealous matters so much to me and indeed the country. I said a moment ago that this is the most multicultural, multiracial, multi-ethnic America ever, and we cannot leave people of color out of this conversation. And it's always been said in our community that if you can see it, you can be it. I know, being a person of color and all the opportunities I've had over my career on PBS and NPR and BET, I've done it all in my career. I know that when people of color talk to people of color, it makes a difference. And so if we're going to make sure rather that we don't leave these folk behind, it matters that for the first time we have a black man Nothing against anybody else, but it means something in this moment that a person of color in this country is leading the Sierra Club. That is a statement in and of itself. Say nothing about his brilliance, which you will see on display in a moment, his brilliance, his aptitude. He was the youngest person to ever lead the venerable NAACP. He made history there. And now he's making history as the head of the Sierra Club, and I'm honored to join him to have a brief conversation about this critical moment and the way he sees it. So I start with a broad question, frame it however you like, Ben Jealous, but what do you see in this moment? How are you reading this moment for all of us, given the data that I've just shared with this audience?
Well, good afternoon. It's great to be here with you. Thank you.
Ben Jealous, ladies and gentlemen.
And, I had the joy of talking to Norman Lear once a week for 3 of the last 4 years of his life when I led People for the American Way. And I know how proud he was of his early involvement in this organization and Lynn's early involvement in this organization. And it's just an honor to be in this house. We've got 5 years and change. Keep the world under 1.5 degrees prayerfully, and definitely under 2. It will take a lot, and yet I have every hope that we can do it. I took this job in part because I was involved in the Sierra Club as a kid. It's one of 2 organizations that defined my childhood, the other being the NAACP. They were the ones who supported me when I started the first high school chapter of the Student Environmental Action Coalition in 1989. But I really took it because of my kids. My son, when he was 9 years old, the last thing you want to talk about was how babies were made. But he did ask me, Dad, but in the future, years from now, should I plan on having one? And I was like, what? And what came up was all of his climate anxiety. Like, little brother been paying attention, listening to the news, listening to the adults. We weren't having these conversations with him. I would imagine we were trying to shield him, if anything. But kids hear everything, and they absorb everything, and they do the math. And what I said to my son was, you may not know this, but when I was a kid, we thought humanity would go extinct from nuclear bombs. We found our way to pull ourselves back from the brink. And when I was a kid, we thought that the bald eagle and all the other raptors were about to go extinct from DDT, and we found a way to pull them back from the brink. And so, son, we will figure out a way. And then I took a moment to think about, okay, how do I make good on that promise to my son? And the reality is that the percentage of Americans who consider themselves environmentalists has been cut in half since the 1980s. It used to be like 78% of us. Now it's more like 38% of us. We've got a lot of work to do. What Tavis is doing is important because we often don't see each other, those of us who are environmentalists. You say environmentalists. I remember my friend Becky Tarbotton used to lead Rainforest Action. She died tragically. And I remember I said to her one day, I said, Becky, what's the big challenge this week at Rainforest Action Network? She said, Ben, it's Groundhog Day. Every week, I'm just trying to convince donors that it takes more than sexy white men in pickups with ponytails to save the planet. I have first cousins who are sexy white men with pickups and ponytails who want to save the planet. But it takes a village to save a village. And at the end of the day, we are just one village spinning around in space on this little speck of dust called Earth. And the reality is, as awkward as it may be to hear this, taken on the whole, the white community is the least environmentally minded of every other community in the country. Latinos are first, blacks are second. I assume Native Americans are higher than that, but not polled well. Asian Americans third, whites fourth. And so the good news is there's a lot of allies to organize. The other good news, and why I'm so optimistic, is we have the technology that we need to get half the equation done. And we have the arguments we need to get most of the country supportive, which is, speak like real talk. One, we are having tremendous health impacts. Sierra Club's Beyond Coal campaign next year, us Bloomberg Philanthropies will celebrate 1 million asthma attacks prevented and 100,000 heart attacks prevented because of the 300 plus coal-fired power plants we have already shut down. People can be way down the rabbit hole and understand those numbers and why they're important. At the same time, now I'm down in Dalton, Georgia, like the heart of Marjorie Taylor Greene's district, maybe the most divisive place in a very divided nation. At the Q-Cells factory, German company purchased by a Korean conglomerate, funded by Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, will soon have the largest solar panel production facility in the Western Hemisphere. And the only one in the United States producing ingot, which is to say from soup to nuts. Every other solar panel production facility in the US will be dependent on Chinese parts. And the only question about China is, do they control 85% of global solar panel production or 98%? So a couple things there, right? One, I don't know an American in either party who wants to switch dependence on foreign oil for dependence on Chinese solar panels. Like real talk. And we have to have a frank conversation about the next economy and whether we're going to lead it or not. But I will tell you this, you're in Dalton, Georgia, people are pretty excited about all the new jobs coming to them and to Cartersville. You go up West Virginia, same thing, solar panel factories. You skip kind of through northern Georgia, Tennessee, there's a battery belt. And as I'm walking out of the Q-Cells, and that's before you get to Detroit, where EVs are rolling off the line. And I'm walking out of the Q-Cells factory, and I almost missed it. But there were 50 or 60 paintings and sketches by children ages 5 to 17 on the wall. And I went back and said, what is this? And they said, these are the submissions of last year's Earth Day competition. So what are they exactly? They said, these are drawings of the children of the factory workers. Dalton, Georgia, again, one of the most divisive places in a very divided nation. I said, what was the contest? They said, draw your parents at work. And they all portrayed their parents as on mission to save the planet. And when the kids in that district get it, there is reason to have hope about a whole bunch of things and a better future. With the technology here, we need to be very clear that this is America's best shot at a real comeback. Most Americans live at this address. I live at the place where there used to be a factory, and when it shut down, what shot up was despair, poverty, hopelessness, meth, opiates. That's where most Americans live. You want to know why our country's so toxic? You can't explain it without talking about NAFTA and shutting down 65,000 factories in this country. It's a hard truth, but it's real truth. And so if you want to heal this nation, we got to have an economy that lifts all boats. And what is our best shot? The economy, the green economy that we're building. Solar panels, wind turbines, batteries, electric vehicles. That's why it was so important that Biden stood up. I know people don't like the word tariffs. You know what I really don't like? Factories being shut down in this country. China has dropped the cost of solar panels 50% in a year by flooding the market. And they're fixing to flood the market with $14,000 EVs. You ask yourself what would happen to the politics of the United States if, in addition to losing textiles and all the other industries we've lost in the last 30 years, we lost the automobile industry. What would happen to the politics of Germany if they lost the automobile industry? We have to be very clear with the people of this country. Where we're leading them is to a place of better health. Where we're leading to them is to a place of more jobs. And there is a battle right now about who will control the next economy. And that economy will be defined by renewable technologies and the like. And the question is, will we lead it or will China? And those are uncomfortable facts. But the people of the heartland understand it because they've paid the price for the last 30 years of us deindustrializing. We can rebuild an economy that lifts all boats, and we do that, we will have a much more united, healthier, and greener nation.
Been jealous. That is why That is why he is leading the Sierra Club, and I'm on this side just asking some questions. So now we got about 11 minutes left here, Ben. So now I want to just do a round on some questions based on what you've said already. There are a few things that popped into my head as you were talking, in no particular order. You mentioned the Biden administration. To my mind, and you and I may disagree, let's find out. To my mind, the Biden administration has done some pretty amazing things in this first term when it comes to the environment. It's always that age-old question of whether it's the message or the messenger. I'm not so sure. We could debate that ad nauseum, ad infinitum. I'm not sure whether it's the message or the messenger. I do know he's done some pretty remarkable things, I believe, this time around. I don't think that's breaking through. I don't think that message is being communicated properly. I hope he has the right surrogates between now and November out spreading that message. But what say you about what he has accomplished versus what the American people know or don't know about that? Does that make sense?
No, 100%. I mean, and it's like President Biden has led our nation in accomplishing so much in this area that it's like so easy to lose track. $1.5 billion invested in restoring urban forests. $7 billion to make it possible for working class people to afford to put solar panels on their roof. And those are just rounding errors on the full suite of investments that are delivering essentially our anti-NAFTA moment, opening up factories across this country to build these technologies. I've known President Biden for a long time. He was there to support me when I was running for governor of Maryland, apparently being the John the Baptist to Westmore's Jesus.
It worked.
It did work, and Wes and I are number 3 and 4 of 5 black male Rhodes Scholars born in Baltimore. I've been close for a long time, rooted in Baltimore. I'm close for a long time. Happy to have played that role. What I know about Joe, what I know is in his heart, President Biden, is he's absolutely on mission for everything that we've been talking about. There are folks around him who overthink the message, and they just need to let Joe out and let him speak clearly to the people and stop trying to have it both ways. Folks like my 75-year-old uncle, who was a Democrat until 2016 and works in a lumber yard in Maine and will never be able to afford to retire, are pretty clear that the Democratic Party gave up on working class white men a long time ago. Joe Biden carries their pain in his heart. And you know there's a whole lot of brothers who feel the same way, right? Because working class white man is really code for having an economic plan for working people because they have no civil rights complaints. And there's a lot of women and there's a lot of men of color who the number one thing, honestly, is just getting a good job that maybe they could be discriminated against on. But until they have a good job, that really is the number one priority, right? Real talk. And Joe can resonate with all those folks. But you can't dress him in the clothes, if you will, from the 1990s. You got to let him show up as the person of today that he is and the person of this moment that he is. So that's my take on President Biden. I am confident if President Biden wins, we will find ourselves on track for our 2030 goals. And if he doesn't, it's going to be a nasty, brutal fight, and we will likely miss, and generations will pay the price in profound ways. If you haven't read the book 6 Degrees, just go through it, and every degree is more terrifying.
We don't need to scare this audience. It's
That's Bill McKibben's job.
It's a bright audience. It's an erudite audience. It's a committed and passionate audience, as evidenced by their presence here this afternoon. But I am curious, though, all jokes aside, everybody keeps saying that Donald Trump is an existential threat to our democracy. I think we mostly agree with that in a variety of ways. But I am curious as to how much worse you think things will get if Joe Biden does not win this election.
I mean, look, when it comes to democracy, if you look at our nation over the centuries, it swings both ways. And honestly, the 20s tend to suck, right? 1920s, 1820s, 1720s, all pretty bad. 1619 certainly was terrible, right?
To be sure.
So there's by the time you get to the 70s,
some of y'all missed that, but ask the black person next to you what that joke what that joke was all about, and they'll tell you. I'm sorry, go
But
ahead,
you
Ben.
know, being from a family that's basically 400 years in this country on both sides, black and white, I see it that way, right? I think by the time that we get to the 70s, as far as democracy, things should probably swing the right way. 1770s, 1870s, 1970s, generally better than the 20s of any of those centuries. The problem is this: in between is this whole climate thing. We got 5 years to get this right. And that's what we have to stay focused on, because we literally unleash nature's wrath, God's wrath, however you want to put it, if we miss this mark. That's what's most at stake. I believe America will survive another Trump presidency, full stop. Let's not be that Pollyannish. Our people have been through a hell of a lot worse. We survived, America will survive, but will the climate of planet Earth survive when he's yelling drill, drill, drill?
So you run for office, and so you understand this better than anybody, and certainly in communities of color, certainly in our community, the black community, we hear these refrains every 4 years. This is the most important election of your lifetime. The two most important days in your life are Election Day and Judgment Day. I could do this all day long. I've been hearing it for all these years. We get that kind of rhetoric every year. And it comes across ultimately and eventually being as hyperbolic when you say that every 4 years. What you said a few times now by my count is that we have 5 years to get this right. How does that not come across as hyperbolic to everyday people, just putting too much on it?
That's not the way to put it.
Say nothing of the Republicans who don't believe the science to begin with.
Yeah, so this is how you talk to the country about how to reach those goals, right? Let's talk about the land conservation goals. Just play along with me for a second. Raise your hand if there's a state park or a national park that you really like even one of them. Just raise your hand. Okay, now keep your hands up. Keep your hands up if you love going there on Labor Day weekend. Oh, it's totally crowded, right? There's your argument for why we need to double the size of our parks. If we 2x just our national parks and monuments, we almost reach our 2030 goals. If we make the roadless rule that Bill Clinton put into effect in the Tongass National Forest the law permanently, we will reach our 2030 goals. We have a lot of ways on land preservation to get there, either with big pieces of land like the Tongass National Forest, or just by rallying the country to have more park space. On the side of all the technology, again, it's really, I think honestly, we've got to level with the American people. They are smart. One of the reasons why that wears thin, right? King assassinated 48% of the black community in poverty. Obama elected 48% of the black, 40 years in between, nothing changed. NAACP, known lots of places, National Association for the Advancement of Certain People, right? For that reason. For that reason. And when you say poverty in America, a lot of people think of black folks. There's 8 million and change blacks in poverty. There's 16 million and change whites in poverty. And you want to know again why politics get toxic? Because you ignore them. And being poor and ignored is a bad place to be for politics. And so for people in this country who are economically struggling, which goes well beyond the ranks of the poor, again, we have to say to them, do you want America to lead the global economy in this century like we did the last century? Of course. Where are automobiles headed? Not when, not if, but when, towards being all electric. Where is power headed? Towards renewables. Should we get there faster or slower? Knowing that China already has 85 to 98% of the solar panel market and is hot on our heels on the EV market. We got to level with the American people and give them the power to make that decision themselves.
I'm not name dropping here, but I'm waiting for Monday. I'm going to be in the White House on Monday for some event that the president invited me to, and I'm going to get in his ear and tell him exactly what you just said about how to talk to the American people about the Labor Day weekend. I'm going to say, Ben Jealous told me to tell you, Mr. President, here's how you talk to the American people on this particular issue that people, I think, can take as being hyperbolic, but that is an excellent answer, and that's why Ben Jealous is president, ED, I should say, of the Sierra Club. We got about 4 minutes left here. I want to circle back to where we began this conversation to close, I think, and that is with the incontrovertible fact I mentioned earlier that we live in the most multicultural, multiracial, multi-ethnic America ever. And a few years from now, we will make up the majority of this country. How, I don't need to color this much more than this, how do you engage and you involve black people and people of color in this conversation?
Well, I think a lot of it is along the lines of what we just talked about. I think the other place is to walk in recognizing that these are communities, black communities, Latino communities, Native American communities, Asian American communities, that are deeply committed to environmentalism, period, full stop. The ballot measures that are passed in California to protect the environment do so on the back of the Latino community, let's be clear. And so I think you show up with respect. At the same time, we need to permit ourselves to engage working class white communities like they understand that they have a dog in this fight too. And I'll give you an example. I was in a state where they still burn sugarcane. Brazil has stopped burning sugarcane because it's so toxic. The organizers, who are almost all white, were talking about how in this black and brown community, read poor, this low-income black and brown community, they were still burning sugarcane around it. But in this rich community, which is an equestrian community that was new, they stopped burning the sugarcane because it was killing the horses. And I said to them, you keep defining one community on racial terms, black and brown, and the other one on economic terms, rich. In the pathway of the smoke, like where it's most toxic, in the darkest pathway of the smoke, what percentage of the impacted people are low-income whites? They said 40%. 40%. The only way Stacey Abrams and I were able to put together a coalition in Georgia to pass the most sweeping criminal justice reform legislation any state had passed at that point, her as minority leader, me as head of the NAACP, inside, outside, was because we sat with Newt Gingrich and her with Nathan Deal, whose son was a drug court judge, and Newt, whose family comes from the ranks of poor white folks who are also over-incarcerated. Most incarcerated white people on the planet are in America. And just talk human to human about how our communities are being ravaged, about how the tactics of the war on crack are being used in the war on meth and moving from black urban areas to white rural areas. If we did not humble ourselves just to talk to them as fellow human beings and expect that they could see that they had a dog in this fight too, we never would have got that legislation passed. Same playbook in Texas. We got Tea Party and NAACP to work together on one issue we could agree on. And so we have to understand that the legacy of racism is also the British colonial legacy of divide and conquer. And we have to be willing to reach across the breach with optimism, that the folks who have also been divided understand on a certain level that they've also been conquered, that they're also paying a price. You know, when white men in America are 75% as likely, last count, which was 10 years ago, to be incarcerated as black men in South Africa at the height of apartheid, when South Africa was the world's leading incarcerator. And then you look at how all those men, those black men, are basically trapped in poverty, and the relative wealth of the white community here, poor white men are more likely to be incarcerated than brothers were in South Africa at the height of apartheid. So there's a deep well of pain to reach into. We got to show up with respect in both communities and treat people like they're smart enough to understand that they got a dog in the fight.
Ben Jealous, Executive Director of the Sierra Club. As I said at the top, he is the right person at the right time in the right place, and we are all better for you being the head of the Sierra Club.
Thank you, brother.
Once again, on June the 18th, you got 25 minutes of Ben today. You're going to get 3 hours of him. 3 hours of him and some other brilliant thinkers on June the 18th.
Can we just hear it for Tavis Smiley?
Oh, stop. No.
He is a national treasure. He is a master convener. Thank you, brother.
No, thank you. June the 18th, 4 o'clock LA time, 7
At
o'clock.
the California Science Center.
At California Science Center. If you want to come, you're welcome to come. It's open to the public. California Science Center, June the 18th, 4 o'clock our time, 7 o'clock Eastern, 6 Central. Reverend Lennox Yearwood, Ben Jealous, the father of environmental justice, Dr. Robert Bullard, MacArthur Genius, Majora Carter,
Peggy Shepard.
Peggy Shepard from the White House, Dr. Denise Fairchild, Mustafa Santiago Ali, just an all-star panel of people of color who will, for the first time, be able to talk to the world, courtesy of C-SPAN, about why this matters to all of us. But until then, thank you for having us today. The Levins, we thank you for doing this. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, guys. God bless you.